Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you were ready to really focus today because we are doing something a little bit different than our usual format.
Yeah, it is a bit of a departure for us.
Right, usually we take a topic, like space travel or a historical event or some new scientific breakthrough, and we just explore it for the sheer joy of learning. But today we actually have a mission.
We do. We are going to try and get you promoted, or at least get you certified to be the person who does the promoting in your organization.
Exactly. We are looking at a stack of documents here that are all focused on one incredibly specific goal, which is passing the Microsoft exam AB-731.
The Microsoft Certified AI Transformation Leader credential.
That's the one. And looking at this study guide, I really have to say, this isn't just for techies, is it?
No, absolutely not. And that is actually the biggest misconception we need to clear up right away. For the last 20 years or so, if you heard the phrase Microsoft certification, you probably assumed you needed to know how to configure a server network or, write C-sharp code.
Right, sitting in a dark room compiling code.
Exactly. But AB-731 is a massive pivot point. It is explicitly designed for the business leader.
So we are talking about the director, the VP, the aspiring C-suite executive.
Yes, the people who realize that AI is basically going to eat the world, and they need to know how to set the table properly before that happens.
I really love that analogy.
Yeah.
Setting the table. So if you are listening to this right now and you are in marketing or HR or operations, and you have been feeling that imposter syndrome creeping in whenever someone mentions generative AI in a board meeting, this deep dive is literally built for you.
Precisely. The learner profile for this exam is a business decision maker. Microsoft is very clear in the source material we are looking at. They are not testing your ability to code a neural network from scratch.
Thank goodness.
Right. They are testing your ability to align AI with tangible business goals. They really want to know if you can identify a high-value use case or if you can spot a compliance risk before it turns into a massive lawsuit.
And drive adoption so the tools actually get used by the staff rather than just becoming expensive shelfware.
Exactly. It is about bridging the gap between the raw technology and the human workforce.
So we are going to act as your study partners for the next hour or so. We have the official study guide for exam AB-731, and we also had the syllabus for the companion course, AB-731T000A.
We have torn this material apart completely.
We really have. We highlighted the traps, organized the concepts into a roadmap, and distilled all of it down. By the time we are done here, you should feel confident enough to log into that proctored exam session and just absolutely crush it.
Or at the very least, confident enough to schedule the exam without having a minor panic attack.
Baby steps, right?
Mhm.
Let us look at the lay of the land first. How is this beast of an exam actually broken down?
It is structured into three massive buckets of skills. Bucket one is the business value of generative AI.
Okay, a foundation.
Exactly. That is
Yeah.
a foundation. And it is weighted very heavily. You are looking at about 35 to 40% of your final score coming just from that bucket.
Wow, so almost half the exam is just understanding the value proposition.
Yes. Then bucket two is what I call the toolkit. This is Microsoft's specific ecosystem. So your Copilots, Azure, all of those specific apps.
And the weighting on that one.
Also 35 to 40%.
Okay, so between the foundation and the toolkit, we are at like 80%. What is bucket three?
Bucket three is strategy and people. This covers implementation, adoption strategies, and governance. That is roughly 20 to 25% of the exam.
So 80% is what is it and what tools do I use, and 20% is how do I get humans to actually use it without burning the company down to the ground?
Roughly, yes. But do not let that smaller percentage fool you. In my experience with these leadership exams, the people questions are where the real ambiguity lives.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. That is where you get those tricky scenario questions with two answers that both look completely correct in the real world, but one is more Microsoft than the other.
Oh, I love those. Select the best answer. My absolute favorite kind of torture. Okay, let us dive right into bucket one, the foundation. The business value of generative AI.
Let's do it.
The study guide starts with a concept that feels kind of basic on the surface, but I feel like a lot of people get it wrong in practice. We need to clearly distinguish between generative AI and what we have been using for the last decade, which they refer to as analytical AI.
Or traditional machine learning. This is a critical distinction for the exam. If you get this wrong, you will miss half of the scenario-based questions right out of the gate.
So how do we separate them in our minds?
Think of analytical AI as the world's most efficient auditor. It looks at data that already exists, it classifies things, it predicts numbers based on past patterns.
So like, is this email spam, yes or no?
Exactly. Or, will this specific customer churn next month? 80% probability. Or, what is the forecasted inventory requirement for Q3? 10,000 units.
It is essentially a really sophisticated calculator. It is looking backward at historical data to predict the future, but it is entirely stuck within the boundaries of the data it already sees.
Precisely. It does not create anything new. It just reorganizes, labels, or projects what is already there. Generative AI, on the other hand, is the creative intern.
The creative intern, I like that.
It creates, if you ask generative AI about that Q3 inventory, it does not just give you the 10,000 unit number. It creates a draft email to the supplier explaining exactly why the order is increasing.
Or it generates a Python script to visualize the supply chain data.
Right, or it creates an image of the new product packaging. It is generating entirely new tokens, new pixels, new code that simply did not exist in the training set.
So let us apply this to a potential exam scenario to make sure this sticks. If I see a question that says a logistics company wants to identify potential supply chain disruptions based on historical weather patterns, that is
Analytical AI.
Yeah.
That is pure pattern recognition. It is analyzing existing data to find a correlation.
But if the scenario is the company wants to draft a press release, apologizing for the supply chain disruption, and automatically translate that release into 5 different languages.
That is generative AI. The key word to look for on the exam is creation. If the output is new content, whether that is text, code, images, or audio, it is generative.
The exam will likely give you a list of business problems and ask you to drag and drop them into the analytical or generative buckets, right?
That is a very common question format, yes. You have to be able to instantly categorize the business need.
Got it. Create versus analyze. Now, staying within generative AI, the study guide talks heavily about models. And this is where the tech jargon starts to get a little thick for the business leaders.
It does get dense here.
We need to talk about tree-trained models versus fine-tuned models. I feel like every vendor at every tech conference tries to sell fine-tuning as the absolute holy grail for enterprises. But reading this study guide, Microsoft seems to be saying, whoa, slow down a minute.
That is exactly right, and this is a classic trap area in the exam. Let us use a real-world analogy to make sense of this. Imagine you need to buy a suit.
Okay, I'm with you.
You go to a high-end department store. You buy a suit right off the rack. It is a Giorgio Armani. It is beautiful. It is extremely high quality. And frankly, it fits 95% of people pretty darn well.
Because it was designed based on the measurements of thousands of average people.
Exactly. That is your pre-trained model. In the Microsoft world, that is GPT-4. It has been trained on effectively the entire public internet. It knows history, biology, coding, poetry, and recipes.
It works right out of the box.
Yes. And for most standard business use cases,
Perfectly fine.
more than fine. It is amazing. If you just want to summarize a meeting transcript, draft a client email, or brainstorm some marketing copy, the off-the-rack model is all you need. It is relatively cheap, and it is instant.
So what exactly is fine-tuning then? Why do people want it?
Fine-tuning is taking that Armani suit to a master tailor and saying, I want you to rip all the seams apart and restitch this garment to fit only my exact body shape.
That sounds expensive.
Very expensive. In AI terms, you take that pre-trained model like GPT-4 and you actually continue the rigorous training process using your specific proprietary data.
So you feed it thousands of your own company's legal contracts.
Or your highly specialized proprietary medical research. The result is a model that is incredibly deeply good at your specific niche. But, and here's the kicker you need to remember for the exam, it requires massive compute power. It requires a dedicated team of data scientists. It requires ongoing maintenance.
And there's a specific risk mentioned in the text too, right?
Yes, catastrophic, forget it.
That sounds like a sci-fi movie concept.
It does, but it is real.
Yeah.
It is where the model gets so hyper-focused on your legal contracts during the fine-tuning process that it literally forgets how to write a normal conversational sentence.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare for a business leader. So the exam rule of thumb is basically do not fine-tune unless you absolutely have to.
Exactly. If the exam question asks a company wants to implement an internal chatbot for HR questions, they want to minimize cost and time to market. Do you, A, fine-tune an open source model on HR documents, or B, use a pre-trained model with grounding?
You choose B.
Always choose B first. Fine-tuning is the last resort. It is reserved for when the off-the-rack model simply fails to understand your highly specific domain language.
Like complex chemical engineering symbols or incredibly obscure legal precedent.
Precisely. You exhaust all other options before you authorize fine-tuning.
Okay, you mentioned grounding just there, and I really want to pin that concept because it sounds like the magic solution to the fine-tuning problem.
It really is.
But before we get there, we actually have to talk about money. The study guide dives into cost drivers, and it uses a word that I see absolutely everywhere but rarely see explained well in a pure business context.
Tokens.
Token. I know a token is not a cryptocurrency coin in this specific context. What is it, and why does a VP of sales or an HR director need to care about it?
This is a crucial concept because tokens are literally the currency of the generative AI economy. Computers do not read words the way we do. They do not see the word apple and understand the fruit.
They see numbers.
Exactly. They see a string of numbers. When you type a prompt into ChatGPT or Copilot, the underlying system breaks your text down into tiny chunks of characters called tokens.
Okay, so how does that translate to something a business leader can visualize?
A rough rule of thumb, and you really should memorize this for the exam context, is that 1,000 tokens is about 750 words.
Okay, let me do the math. So a standard single-spaced page of text is roughly 500 words. So 1,000 tokens is basically a page and a half of text.
Correct. Now, here is the massive economic trap that leaders fall into when they roll this out. In many of the Azure AI pricing models, you pay for what goes in, which is the prompt, and you pay for what comes out, which is the completion.
Both directions cost money.
Exactly. Let us look at a scenario. Let us say you have an employee, let's call him Bob. Bob wants to summarize a 50-page annual financial report.
Classic Bob.
Right. Bob copies and pastes the entire 50-page report into the AI chat window and simply types, summarize this.
Okay, so that 50-page report is roughly 15,000 words.
Which means that is 20,000 tokens going in.
And then the AI reads all that and writes a nice one-paragraph summary.
Right. That summary is maybe 200 tokens coming out.
So the company just paid for 20,200 tokens for that one interaction.
Exactly. Now compare that to a different employee. Let us say Bob takes just the executive summary section of that report, which is only 1 page long, pastes that in, and asks for a critique.
That is maybe 1,000 tokens total.
Right. Bob number 1 just cost the company 20 times more than Bob number 2 for essentially a very similar strategic outcome.
And if you multiply Bob by 10,000 enterprise employees, doing this 5 times a day,
suddenly the CFO is knocking very loudly on your door asking why the Azure cloud bill is higher than the GDP of a small island nation.
wow. So the exam wants you to fundamentally understand that prompt engineering is not just about getting more accurate answers.
No, it is heavily about cost optimization. Efficient prompting literally saves the company money. As a leader, you need to establish policies or training programs to prevent token waste.
Are there other technical limits tied to this?
Yes, you also need to understand context windows.
Which is what? The model's short-term memory.
Exactly. It is the hard limit of how many tokens the AI can remember at any one time during a conversation. If Bob pastes a document that exceeds the context window, the AI literally forgets the beginning of the document by the time it reaches the end.
It pushes the old tokens out to make room for the new ones.
Right. So you get a bad answer and you paid maximum price for it.
That is such a great insight. It is not just the old IT adage of trash in, trash out. It is trash in, cash out.
Trash in, cash out? I really like that. I might actually steal that for my next university lecture.
It is all yours. Consider it open source. Okay, staying on the gloomy side of things for a minute, let's talk about the risks. The elephant in the boardroom.
It is a big elephant.
The study guide lists 3 big ones that you absolutely must be able to identify and mitigate: fabrications, reliability, and bias. We have all heard the media horror stories.
Like the lawyer who used ChatGPT to write a legal brief, and it cited court cases that literally did not exist.
Mata versus Avianca, right?
Yes, a classic textbook example of fabrication. The exam often uses the term hallucination in passing, but fabrication is the more formal term you might see in the AB-731 multiple choice options.
So why does it do that? Why does a supercomputer lie?
Here's the core concept you have to grasp. Generative AI is probabilistic, not deterministic.
Okay, break that down for those of us who skipped advanced statistics.
Deterministic means 2 + 2 = 4. Every single time.
Like Microsoft Excel.
Exactly. Excel is deterministic. If you put the formula in correctly, you get the exact same answer every single time you hit enter.
And probabilistic.
Probabilistic means the AI is constantly guessing. It is predicting the next word in the sentence based purely on statistical likelihood.
So it does not actually know the facts.
No, if the sentence starts, the cat sat on the handle, the AI calculates that the word mat is 80% likely to follow, the word floor is 15% likely, and the word spaceship is 0.001% likely.
So it picks Matt.
Right. Because it is guessing based on massive patterns, it inherently prioritizes plausibility over actual truth. It desperately wants to give you an answer that sounds correct to a human ear.
So if it does not know the answer to a legal question,
It might construct a sentence that sounds totally professional, uses all the right legal jargon, and is factually 100% fabricated.
and we just have to accept that. That is a feature, not a bug.
It is just how the core technology works at a mathematical level. You cannot just write a quick software patch to fix it. This is exactly why the human-in-the-loop concept is a mandatory exam answer.
Human in the loop.
Yes. You never, ever auto-execute generative AI output for high-stakes business decisions without human verification.
Okay, that covers fabrications. Then we have bias. And from a leadership perspective, this feels like a massive corporate liability issue.
It absolutely is. These foundational models are trained on the internet. The internet is a reflection of humanity, and humanity, historically, is heavily biased.
Therefore, the model inherits those biases.
Precisely. If you ask an AI image generator to show you a photo of a doctor, and its training data was 80% male doctors, the generator will almost exclusively show you men.
And for a business leader taking this exam, why is that critical?
Because it is a massive liability risk. Let us say you use a new AI tool to screen incoming resumes, and the AI quietly penalizes candidates with names that sound ethnic because of some skewed historical training data it absorbed.
You're not just dealing with a quirky tech glitch at that point.
No, you are actively violating equal opportunity employment laws. You are going to get sued and you will lose.
So an exam question might look something like, you are deploying an AI recruiting tool. What must you do before go live?
And the correct answer is not check the server latency. The answer is assess the model for bias against protected groups using responsible AI frameworks.
Got it. You have to audit the output for fairness. And finally, in this risk section, we have security.
Right, and the biggest risk here is data leakage.
Putting confidential company financial data into a public consumer-grade model where it might be absorbed and used to train future versions of the model for everyone else to see.
Exactly, which is a fast track to getting fired.
Which brings us beautifully to the solution for a lot of these enterprise problems. The term we pinned earlier, grounding.
Yes, the lifesaver.
And its best friend, the acronym RJG. RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. I will say this right now, if you are listening to this and you want to pass this exam, you need to deeply understand RAG.
I completely agree. It is arguably the most important technical concept for a non-technical leader to grasp because it solves the freshness problem and the hallucination problem simultaneously.
Okay, so let's unpack it. Walk me through RA.
If you walk away from this deep dive remembering one technical architecture, make it this one. We talked earlier about the pre-trained model being the Armani suit, or the brain. It knows a lot of general stuff about the world.
But it does not know my specific business.
Right. It does not know your company's specific travel expense return policy. It does not know your Q3 confidential sales data or your internal HR memos from yesterday.
So if I ask Public GPT-4, what is our company's remote work policy?
It will hallucinate a beautifully written, entirely generic corporate policy because it simply does not have access to your private document.
So how do we fix that safely? We already established that fine-tuning the model with our HR docs is too expensive and risky.
We use RA. Imagine you are taking a difficult test. You are a smart person representing the pre-trained model, but you do not know the specific historical dates for the answers.
Okay.
I walk over and I hand you a reference textbook. That textbook represents your secure company data. Now, when I ask you a test question, you follow a strict three-step process. Step 1, retrieve. You search the index of the textbook for the relevant page.
Step 2?
Step 2, augment. You combine your general native intelligence with the specific facts on that page.
And step 3 is generation.
Exactly. You generate the final written answer based absolutely only on the page I just gave you.
That is so clear.
That is RA. It bridges the powerful generic brain of the AI with the highly specific, secure library of your proprietary business data.
So bringing this into the Microsoft ecosystem context, this means pointing Microsoft Copilot at your secure SharePoint sites, your internal OneDrive, your exchange emails.
Exactly. When you use Copilot inside Microsoft Teams and you ask it, what did Susan say about the Q4 marketing budget, it is performing RGA behind the scenes.
It searches your emails, which is the retrieval.
It finds Susan's email, feeds it securely to the model, which is the augmentation, and then it summarizes it for you right there in the chat window, which is the generation.
And all of that happens without your data ever leaking out to train the public model.
Precisely. For the exam, if the business goal stated in the question is reliability, security, and accuracy on internal company data, the answer is almost always R.
And you mentioned earlier that this also solves the freshness problem. How does that work?
Well, a fine-tuned model is essentially frozen in time. If you spent $1 million training it last month, it does not know anything about the urgent memo the CEO sent this morning.
Right.
But RAG looks at your documents live. If you update the HR policy document in SharePoint today at noon, RAG sees it instantly at 12:01 because it actively retrieves the document at the exact moment you ask the question.
It is searching the live index. That is brilliant. Okay, perfect. One last stop in this foundation section. Data. The raw fuel for all of this.
The most unglamorous but vital part.
The study guide talks at length about representative data sets. We briefly touched on this with the bias discussion, but let us talk about the old garbage in, garbage out principle.
It is the golden rule of data science. AI is only as good as the data it eats. If you are a massive global retailer, but your centralized sales database only contains data from your United States stores,
And you use AI to predict global fashion trends.
you're going to have a very bad time. The AI will blindly assume the entire world shops exactly like Americans do in the Midwest. That is a textbook non-representative data set.
It lacks global context.
Exactly. The exam expects you as a leader to know that before you even start an AI project, you have to audit your data estate. Is it clean? Is it actually accessible to the systems? And is it truly representative of the reality you are trying to model?
And there's a mention of the machine learning lifecycle here, too.
Yes. You do not just deploy an AI model and forget about it. You have to monitor its outputs, retrain it if you're using traditional ML, and constantly update your data pipelines. It is an ongoing operational commitment, not a one-time IT project.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. That is section 1 wrapped up, the foundation.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We know what it is, distinguishing the creative intern from the analytical auditor. We know the cost structures, avoiding token waste. We know the risks of hallucinations and bias. And we know the fix, which is grounding and R.
If you have all that internalized, you are halfway to passing the exam.
Let us get the other half then. Moving on to section 2, the toolkit. This is another 35 to 40% of the exam score.
This is where Microsoft stops being politely theoretical and starts actively checking if you actually know their specific product catalog.
And honestly, the naming conventions. I have to say, Microsoft loves to rename things. It is like a corporate hobby for them.
It does keep us on our toes, I will admit. But for the AB-731 exam, the stack is actually pretty well defined and stable. You primarily need to know the functional difference between the consumer or worker tools and the builder tools.
Let us start with the absolute flagship product, Microsoft 365 Copilot. This is the tool designed for the everyday knowledge worker, right?
Right. This is the deep integration into the classic Office apps we have all used for decades. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, Outlook.
The exam is going to give us use case scenarios here, isn't it?
Yes, you need to be able to instantly map the business task to the correct M365 app.
Let us rapid fire this then to test it out. Scenario 1, I have a dense Word document with a 20-page project proposal. I need to present it to the executive board tomorrow morning, and I haven't started my deck.
You open Copilot in PowerPoint, you point it at the Word document, and it automatically generates a structured slide deck based on the text.
Beautiful. Scenario 2, I missed an important hour-long meeting because I was busy recording a deep dive. I need to know if my name was mentioned and what my specific action items are.
You open Copilot in Teams. It uses the meeting transcript to recap the entire discussion and specifically identifies any action items that were verbally assigned to you.
Scenario 3, I have a really messy spreadsheet of regional sales data. I need to identify seasonal trends and visualize the outliers for a report.
Copilot in Excel. It can write the complex formulas for you, format the tables, and generate the pivot charts with a simple text prompt.
Okay, those feel pretty intuitive. Let's get a little harder. Copilot Chat, which used to be called Business Chat, versus Microsoft Copilot Studio. What is the fundamental difference there?
Good question. Copilot Chat is the cross-app experience. It is basically a standalone chat window that sits across your entire data estate.
So it's not locked inside Word or Excel.
Right. It can look at your calendar, your Outlook email, and your SharePoint files all simultaneously. You can ask it, prepare me for my 2 p.m. meeting with Acme Corp.
And what does it do?
It looks up the calendar invite, finds the recent email threads with Acme Corp attendees, searches for recent Word documents named Acme, and compiles a comprehensive briefing document for you. It connects the dots across the different apps.
Okay, that is super powerful. So then what is Copilot Studio? This is a term I see highlighted over and over in the study guide materials.
Copilot Studio is the customization layer. This is where you graduate from simply being a user to being a builder.
But I don't know how to code.
And that is the key. It is a low-code or no-code environment. Let us say you are an HR director. You are completely exhausted from answering the exact same question about dental benefits 10 times a day.
I can imagine.
You want a bot that handles those specific questions. You go into Copilot Studio. You point the studio directly at your employee handbook PDF or your internal HR intranet URL.
You just give it the source material.
Yes. Then you hit Publish, and you deploy that custom bot directly into Microsoft Teams. Now, when employees have a question, they chat with the HR bot. You built a custom AI solution, and you did not write a single line of Python.
So Copilot Studio is for building customized conversational agents for specific business functions, firmly grounded in your specific departmental data.
Exactly. So for the exam, remember this rule. If the business need is standard everyday productivity, use M365 Copilot. If the need is a custom conversational agent for a specific workflow or department, use Copilot Studio.
Got it. Now, there's a very distinct question type mentioned in the syllabus about user personas. Specifically, the researcher persona versus the analyst persona.
Yes, they test this nuance.
This feels a bit semantic to me. How does the exam actually distinguish between these two roles?
It is all about the intent of the prompt and the source of the data being queried. If you are asking Copilot to browse the public web, find current events, summarize news articles, or look up historical facts.
Like, who is the CEO of Company X, or what were their public earnings last quarter?
Right. In that case, you are acting as a researcher. You are gathering external public information. But if you are providing internal proprietary data, like uploading that messy Excel file and asking the AI for mathematical calculations, pattern recognition, or structural formatting.
Then you're acting as an analyst.
Exactly. It seems minor, but the exam might give you a sample prompt and ask which persona is the user primarily adopting here, or which underlying feature set is being utilized. You have to know the difference between external fact-finding and internal data manipulation.
Okay, that makes sense. Now we enter some slightly confusing territory for business folks. The build versus buy decision matrix, or as Microsoft often puts it in the docs, use the app versus extend the app versus build your own.
This is a major strategic concept for the certification.
We already established the baseline. Start with M365 Copilot, that is, using the app. But if that out-of-the-box solution does not work, we are supposed to extend it. How exactly do we do that?
We extend it using plugins and connectors, and this is where a technology called Microsoft Graph enters the chat.
I hear about the graph all the time. What is it, simply?
Microsoft Graph is essentially the gateway or the central nervous system for all your M365 data. It is the glue that holds your emails, chats, and files together so Copilot can see them.
Okay, so Copilot talks to the graph.
Right. But let us say your sales department uses Salesforce for their CRM, not Microsoft Dynamics. M365 Copilot cannot inherently see inside Salesforce by default. It hits a brick wall.
Because it is outside the Microsoft ecosystem.
Exactly. So you use a graph connector or a custom plugin to securely pipe that specific Salesforce data into the Microsoft Graph.
Oh, I see.
Now suddenly, Copilot can see that external data. You can be in Outlook and tell Copilot draft an email to the primary contact mentioned in the specific Salesforce opportunity.
Because the connector bridged the gap, so extensibility allows Copilot to safely interact with non-Microsoft third-party data.
Correct. You are literally extending the operational reach of the Copilot tool.
But what if Copilot, even with connectors, just isn't enough? What if I am a massive enterprise, like Walmart or NASA? I need to build something completely proprietary, heavy-duty, and highly customized to a unique physical process. We are not just chatting in Teams anymore, are we?
No, absolutely not. Now we have crossed over into Microsoft Foundry, which is also heavily linked with Azure AI Studio in the exam materials. The terminology shifts a bit depending on the exact module, but think of this space as the pro shop.
the pro shop for the heavy lifters.
Exactly. Copilot is for end users and managers. Foundry and Azure AI Studio are for hardcore developers and enterprise architects. This is where you essentially rent the raw computing power of the foundational models to build your own bespoke applications from the ground up.
And within that Azure environment, we have specific Azure AI services. The exam syllabus lists a few distinct ones we need to know, like Azure Vision and Azure AI Search.
Let's do scenarios for these so they stick.
Perfect. Give me a scenario for Azure Vision.
You are the VP of operations at a major manufacturing company. You want to automatically detect physical defects on the factory assembly line as parts move by on a conveyor belt.
Okay.
You mount high-speed cameras above the belt. You feed that live video stream directly into Azure Vision. It analyzes the pixels in real time, instantly flags any defective parts, and triggers a mechanical arm to remove them.
Wow. And Copilot definitely cannot do that.
No, Copilot generates text and images for office workers. It does not monitor high-speed physical assembly lines. That requires Azure Vision.
Got it. And what about Azure AI Search?
Scenario, you are the managing partner of a global law firm. You have an archive of 10 million PDF contracts that were scanned into a database back in the 1980s.
A massive unstructured data swamp.
Exactly. You want your paralegals to be able to type a query like, find all contracts where the liability clause mentions force majeure due to extreme weather.
But a simple keyword search won't work perfectly.
Right. You do not want basic Control-F keyword matching because maybe the actual contract text says act of God instead of force majeure. You want semantic search. You want the system to understand the actual meaning and intent of the query.
So Azure AI Search does that.
Yes, it indexes all those millions of documents and allows you to build a highly intelligent search engine on top of them. In fact, this is very often the retrieval engine that powers your custom ARI architecture we talked about earlier.
Okay, so to summarize this for the test taker, the decision tree for the leader is essentially a three-step process. Step 1, can standard M365 Copilot do the job out of the box? If yes, buy the licenses. Step 2, can M365 Copilot do it if we just add a third-party connector to our other software? If yes, extend it.
Right, again.
Step 3, is it a totally custom, heavy-duty, or physical world application? If yes, build it from scratch in Azure or Foundry.
That is the perfect summary. If you memorize that simple decision tree, you will answer 20% of the exam questions correctly without breaking a sweat. You also need to consider the scalability and security aspects. Building natively in Azure allows you to tightly control the exact geographic region your data lives in, enforce specific compliance standards, and utilize auto-scaling capabilities that a simple SaaS app simply might not offer.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting for me personally, because now we move to Section 3, strategy and people.
The human element.
Exactly. This is only 20 to 25% of the exam score, but let us be totally real here. This is 90% of your actual day job as a leader.
Without a doubt.
You can buy the absolute best AI tech in the world. You can have Azure humming perfectly. But if your company culture is toxic or your governance model is non-existent, the whole initiative will completely fail.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker famously said, and I assure you, culture eats AI for lunch.
The exam focuses extremely heavily on responsible AI in this section. We need to memorize the 6 pillars.
Yes, the 6 pillars are non-negotiable for the exam. I am going to list them out. Let's play a game. I'll name the pillar, and you tell me what the real-world business consequence is if we ignore it.
Challenge accepted. Hit me.
Pillar 1, fairness.
If you completely ignore fairness, your AI inevitably discriminates. It denies mortgage loans to women at a higher rate. It rejects resumes from minority candidates because of historical data skew. The result? Massive class action lawsuits, catastrophic brand damage, and heavy regulatory fines.
Spot on. Pillar 2, reliability and safety.
If you ignore this one, your AI makes dangerous mistakes in critical real-world situations. An AI diagnostic tool misdiagnoses a patient in a hospital. An automated self-driving warehouse forklift crashes into a shelving unit. The result is actual physical harm to humans and massive operational downtime.
Exactly. The system must be incredibly resilient to manipulation and systemic failures. Pillar 3, privacy and security.
Oh, this is the big one. If you ignore privacy and security, your AI leaks corporate secrets. A mid-level manager asks Copilot to summarize a departmental meeting, and the AI casually reveals that massive layoffs are coming next quarter because it somehow had access to a private HR file it never should have seen. The result is a devastating data breach and a total loss of employee trust.
And probably boredom resignation. Pillar 4, inclusiveness.
If you ignore inclusiveness, your tools simply do not work for everyone in your workforce. The AI voice recognition system fails to understand employees with certain regional accents. Or the user interface isn't accessible to visually impaired users who rely on screen readers. The result is that you actively alienate a significant portion of your workforce or your customer base.
Excellent. Pillar 5, transparency.
This is the classic black box problem. If you ignore transparency, you cannot legally or ethically explain why the AI made a specific decision. If a customer calls and asks, "Why exactly was my business loan denied?" and your only answer is, "Well, the computer algorithm said so," that is entirely unacceptable. You need explainability built into the model.
Perfect. And the final one, pillar 6, accountability.
The buck starts with the human. Always. You absolutely cannot blame the algorithm in a court of law or a board meeting. If the AI messes up and causes financial damage, the human leader who deployed it is responsible.
That is a guaranteed exam question right there. They will present a scenario where an AI makes an error and ask, who is ultimately accountable for the AI's output? The answer is always the human leader or the organization, never the software vendor, and never the model itself.
Okay, so we have memorized the 6 pillars. But how does a leader actually enforce them in a messy corporate environment? The study guide talks a lot about forming an AI council. Is this just going to be another boring monthly committee meeting where nothing gets done?
It is a committee meeting, yes, but it is arguably the most important one you will put on your calendar this decade. The exam specifically wants you to know who needs to be sitting at that table.
I assume it is not just the IT department.
Definitely not. If it is just IT, you fail. You must have legal at the table to prevent the lawsuits we just talked about. You need HR to manage the impact on employee jobs and training. You need the chief information security officer to protect the data. And you need the core business leaders to ensure the AI is actually driving ROI.
So it is cross-functional by design.
Entirely cross-functional. The AI Council sets the overarching rules of engagement. They are the ones who decide, yes, the marketing team is authorized to use an enterprise license of Midjourney for ad concepts. Or, no, the finance team is strictly forbidden from uploading the quarterly ledger to a public ChatGPT window.
They establish the strict governance principles before the organization starts rolling out the shiny new tools.
Exactly. Governance precedes deployment. That is a core tenet.
Okay, so the governance is set. Now, let us talk about the deployment phase itself, the actual adoption.
Yeah.
The study guide highlights barriers to adoption. What is typically the biggest barrier you see? Is it that the software is just too technically difficult for older workers to learn?
Rarely. The software interface is literally just a chat box. If you can text your kids, you can use Copilot. The interface is incredibly easy. The true barrier is psychological. It is fear, and it is inertia.
Fear of replacement.
Exactly. Employees are sitting there thinking, is this bot going to replace my job in 6 months? Am I fundamentally too old to learn this new workflow? I don't trust the answers it gives me. I have always done my reports this manual way. Why should I change now just because corporate says so?
So how does a transformation leader actually fix that fear? The answer obviously isn't just sending a generic rah-rah email from the CEO.
No, that never works. The Microsoft-approved answer and the reality of what works is the Champions program.
Ah, the champions.
This is classic textbook organizational change management. You cannot just push this massive cultural change strictly from the top down. You have to push it side to side, peer to peer.
How does that look in practice?
You actively identify the champions.
Yeah.
These are the eager beavers in the accounting department, in sales, in HR, who naturally love playing with new technology.
You find the early adopters.
Right. You give them the premium licenses first, you
Right.
give them specialized training, and then you let them loose. Because when a skeptical accountant sees super user Steve finishing his month end close in half the normal time because he is using Copilot macros,
The skeptical accountant doesn't listen to the CIO's memo. He listens to Steve.
exactly. He walks over to the desk and says, hey, Steve, show me exactly how you did that. That is how you drive true organic adoption. Peer-to-peer evangelism is vastly more powerful than an executive mandate.
I love that strategy. Find the Steves. Okay, lastly, for this section, we have to do a little bit of administrative housekeeping. Logistics and licensing.
I know it is the dry stuff.
Yawn, right. But it directly affects the departmental budget, so it is absolutely going to be on the test.
Mm.
There are two primary billing models we need to grasp here. User-based versus consumption-based. Break that down for us.
User-based licensing is the Copilot model. You essentially pay a flat set fee, for example, $30 per user per month. It is exactly like a monthly gym membership.
Whether the employee uses it once to write an email or 1,000 times to generate massive reports. The cost to the company is exactly the same.
Correct. So the leadership strategy here is only assign these expensive licenses to people who will actually utilize them. If you buy a license for someone and they never open the app, you are just setting money on fire every month.
And what about the consumption-based model?
That is the Azure AI Services side, the builder side. In this model, you pay strictly for what you use. You are billed for the server compute cycles, the data storage, and the sheer number of tokens processed by the API.
Like a water bill.
Exactly like a utility bill. The strategy here is that it naturally scales up and down with demand. It is fantastic for unpredictable, fluctuating workloads. But it is highly risky for strict budget control.
Because if someone writes bad code,
Right. If a developer writes an inefficient prompt loop, or if your new customer-facing app suddenly goes viral on social media, you need to have set strict spending limits or budget alerts within the Azure portal. Otherwise, you will wake up at the end of the month to an absolutely astronomical surprise bill.
so to simplify for the exam, Copilot equals a predictable, fixed cost. Azure equals a variable, scalable cost.
Exactly. And you must also understand that your choice of license tier heavily impacts data privacy. Enterprise-level licenses generally come with a strict contractual guarantee that your corporate data is never used to train the public foundational models. Free or standard consumer versions of AI tools usually do not offer that essential legal protection.
That is a critical distinction for the legal team. Okay, we have covered an absolute mountain of ground here today.
We really have.
From the core definition of generative versus analytical AI to the brutal economics of tokens, diving deep into the ArgAge architecture, mapping out the Copilot ecosystem, and finally unpacking the governance pillars and ethics.
It is a lot of material to synthesize, but just remember the basic exam logistics as you study.
Right, the practical stuff.
The exam is typically around 40 to 50 questions. You are given roughly 100 minutes to complete it. The passing score is a 700 out of 1,000.
And a quick note on the features they test on.
Yes, keep a close eye on preview features versus general availability. The live exam usually focuses heavily on GA features, things that are fully released to the public. But sometimes, a major feature that was still in public preview when the exam was authored might sneak its way into a question. Always read the exact wording of the scenario very carefully.
And remember, these cloud certifications expire. This isn't a college degree where it is one and done for life. You have to renew this credential annually, usually by taking a shorter, free online assessment. It forces you to stay current as the tech evolves.
And this tech literally changes every single week.
It really does. Before we sign off today, I want to just zoom out for a second. We have spent an hour talking about tokens and apps and governance councils, but the actual title of this certification is AI Transformation Leader.
It is a very deliberate title.
It's not AI Administrator, it's not Prompt Engineer, it is Leader.
That is the absolute key to everything we have discussed. If you successfully pass this exam, you are actively signaling to the job market that you are prepared to bridge the biggest gap in modern business. We have plenty of brilliant software engineers. We have plenty of traditional middle managers. What we have is a massive critical shortage of professionals who can fluently speak both of those languages.
People who can look at a legacy business process, completely understand where the human friction is, and know exactly which AI architecture can solve it safely, ethically, and profitably.
Exactly.
But there is a deeper question lurking underneath all of this process optimization. The Microsoft Study Guide talks enthusiastically about building AI fluency for leaders.
It does.
But as we continually deploy these increasingly autonomous agents that can soon plan, reason, and execute complex multi-step tasks without us, the fundamental definition of work is changing.
Radically changing.
If you are leading a team of 20 people and 50% of their daily cognitive load, the drafting, the spreadsheet analyzing, the email summarizing, is entirely shifted to Microsoft Copilot, what exactly is left for the human worker to do?
That is the million-dollar existential question for modern management. I truly believe that what is left is judgment. We are rapidly moving away from an economy of raw production.
Right, who can type the fastest, who can make the PowerPoint slide look the prettiest?
Exactly. That is a commodity now. We are moving toward an economy of judgment. The value is now in who can ask the AI the most insightful strategic question. Who has the domain expertise to accurately verify the AI's complex answer? Who has the moral and ethical compass to decide if executing this AI-generated strategy is actually the right thing to do for the brand and society?
That is a profound shift. You are not managing their physical time or their keystrokes anymore. You are managing their taste, their ethics, and their strategic foresight.
Yes. But let me leave you with an even more provocative thought to chew on after you pass this exam.
Oh, please do.
Right now, this entire AB-731 certification is predicated on the human-to-AI relationship. How does a human prompt the AI? How does a human govern the AI? But the technology is advancing so fast that we're entering the era of agent-to-agent interaction.
Meaning AI talking directly to AI.
Exactly. Your company's AI procurement agent automatically negotiating pricing with your supplier's AI sales agent in milliseconds, completely without human intervention.
Wow.
So the question you need to mull over is, how does an AI transformation leader govern an ecosystem where the primary workers aren't human employees using Copilot, but autonomous AI agents executing massive business processes at machine speed? How do you audit a conversation between two neural networks?
That is slightly terrifying, but incredibly fascinating. We are training for the current paradigm, but the next paradigm is already knocking on the door.
Precisely. Passing this exam proves you understand today. Your ongoing career success will depend on how you prepare for tomorrow's agentic economy.
Well, on that slightly mind-bending note, we are going to officially wrap up this deep dive. To everyone listening out there, do not just read the study guide. Get into the Microsoft Learn sandbox.
Get hands-on immediately.
Don't just theorize about it. Actually build a simple bot in Copilot Studio. Run a semantic search query in Azure. You cannot learn how to swim just by reading a textbook about water.
Get wet. Jump in. Good luck with the AB-731 exam. You absolutely have got this.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you in the next deep dive.